flush comments from the commissioners before we'll open it up for the public.
Thank you, Bob.
Go ahead, Garrett.
Well, I'll just give it another few seconds. Okay. So overall, the site meets the parking standards as required by town code. Snow storage and landscaping. The site plan provides snow storage areas that do meet town code. However, I want to note that a snow storage or removal plan was not provided. That is a condition of approval that town staff has noted in our review letter to the applicant, and applicant will provide this with the final plat submittal. Another thing I want to note with regards to landscaping, mixed use developments in the Riverwalk district actually don't need to provide any landscaping, but the applicant is proposing landscaping, which is certainly appreciated. However, the landscaping plan that was provided doesn't meet town code. There are specific specifications around the landscaping to be provided. So if landscaping is ultimately still pursued, as you know, the town would ultimately be in favor of, a code compliant landscaping plan is a condition of approval. Another thing that's a condition of approval is an exterior lighting plan. This was not provided in the site plan for the development. And again, it's a condition of approval. Broadly speaking, the lighting plan shall comply with the following listed there, you know, dark sky compliant luminaires, as well as those different lighting intensity metrics. So again, this is a condition of approval, should be submitted with the final plat application and will be reviewed for code compliance. So ultimately, you know, staff's recommendation is approval with the conditions that all, you know, planning comments and all referral review comments be addressed at the time of final plat submittal. Additionally, it's noted that the preliminary plat approval is valid for 1 year, so the applicant has to submit a final plat application within that 1 year time for approval, again, by the Planning Commission and the board. And at this time, I stand for any questions or discussion.
Thank you, Garrett. And just for confirmation, the conditions that you have just spoken of, how many are there?
So if you look at the referral comment letter that's in the packet, I forget the specific attachment number, but it's a, you know, multi-page letter, I believe. Comments from planning from myself encompassed maybe 3 or so pages. Public Works and our engineering consultant, the town engineer Merrick, provided an additional set of review comments. You know, there were comments from the town attorney, East Grand Fire District, Mountain Parks Electric. So there are, you know, quite a few referral comments. It's a, you know, I think the total letter is somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 pages, but overall, I think the conditions of approval and these addressing these referral comments, nothing is too earth shattering, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Okay. And you did mention that we have legal publication notice, and it was provided in the packet and provided to the public on time.
Yes. So just going back to this, the requirement is 2 weeks notice in a newspaper of general circulation. That public notice is that appeared in Middle Park Times is right there on the screen. From the applicant's side, they're required to mail out notices to all property owners within 200 feet of the property, and they simply have to mail them out at least 2 weeks in advance. You know, given the way the postal system sometimes work, maybe it doesn't reach those property owners in time. You know, I believe this weekend was where we had kind of the big snowstorm that Thursday. But they were mailed out on March 12th, which again is more than 2 weeks in advance. And those affidavits are provided in the packet.
Okay. Thank you, Garrett. At this time, I'd like to go around and ask each commissioner if they have any questions for Garrett or initial thoughts they want to share. Eileen, would you start?
Okay, is there any chance of a design change, or we had hoped to have commercial on the riverside of the building, but it's not all residential now.
Do we have, the applicant here tonight?
Yeah, but we do.
Yes, he is.
Could you speak to that, please?
Hi, Kevin Rifkin, Bison Investments. To address your comment, so we went through the new zoning process with a lot of you in this room, and the condition and how the new zoning for the Riverwalk, I think specifically called out the first 20 feet of Clayton Court. So that's under the direction here that we went. The other issue, which we agree we want commercial on the river, and we have more plans down south to put more commercial on the river. The issue at this site is just how narrow it is. And what happens is once we tried to get commercial on both sides by meeting the 20-foot requirement on Clayton Court and then doing something on the river, it just wasn't feasible to get something in here. If we had about 30 more feet, because as Garrett mentioned, with the 26-foot drive aisle, and then the parking becomes public parking and not a private street, that road behind it would have to become 26 feet, and we just couldn't make it work. So we are committed to getting retail on the river in one of these sites on Clayton Court, and multiple sites. But for this one, we figured that going down Fraser Avenue, looking right into that commercial space is kind of the best use of where we can put commercial.
And Kevin, also Michael Brock had told you that we wanted commercial on the street side, is correct? And that's where it was mandatory that you had commercial.
Yeah, it was our understanding that it was most important, and required on Clayton Court, and especially with the sidewalks going in, and the activation of Clayton Court, we wanted to make sure that that's where the pedestrian traffic was on this one. But yes, our understanding per the code was that the first 20 feet on Clayton Court was commercial.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The Riverwalk District, the language in our code talks about activating, Clayton Court, Highway 40, streets as well as the Fraser River. There's no specific requirement to provide commercial uses along the Fraser River. The requirement is to provide commercial along Clayton Court. So they're satisfying that. And again, it meets the letter of the code with that respect. So.
And Eileen, I agree with you. The original plan of the trustees and the board was to have a loop of commercial, especially along the river, so we could highlight something special that nobody else has in Grand County, and that's commercial on the river. That got between the land trade and other stuff. It's just an oversight that happened. That's why that land trade was so important, so we could have master planned that whole area before Kevin and Greg had a chance to get their plans going. But they were already working on these a year ago before we even started land trade. So just a little miss.
Yep.
Catch it up on the next ones.
And then I noticed it says 6-inch water main, but I thought yesterday I heard 8-inch. I don't know if that makes any difference, but
The size of the water main is not yet determined. It's in the design. There is no water main currently in front. The existing in Clayton Court on the south side is 6-inch, but we're anticipating upgrading it to 8 to create the better loop into Doc Suzie, which is 8.
Kevin, how high are those back decks off the ground?
The back
From like
decks.
there's that trail back there. Do you have an idea?
Yeah, so one thing we tried to do as much as possible, the back decks are from grade, are about 12 feet to the bottom of the deck. And looking at grade, if you've been down there, there's an embankment on the back of the parcel. And so we've spent some time to try and hide the townhomes from the river trail, but at the same time, one thing that we did was look at some other towns that have had a lot of success with a downtown district like this. And it's a good balance of hiding, but also being present. Steamboat does a really good job. Vale does a really good job of, hey, when you're on the trail, you feel like you're in nature, you feel like you're away from everything. But once you get into that downtown area, there has to be some kind of almost marker, and you have to feel like, oh, I want to get off the trail, come in and get a coffee. And so our architects spent a lot of time doing that. And so those are about 12 feet. we reduced the overall height of the townhomes. They're below 40 feet. And I think the height is 45 feet here. And we did that for two reasons, right? One is that we wanted to make these not as prominent from the river. And two, we know that the art center eventually could go in next door, and we want that to be the defining feature there. And from the plans that Steve shared 2 weeks ago, he's going 45 feet with a rooftop deck. We want that to overshadow these 10 times out of 10. Do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, just on the height of the buildings, we dropped it to, they're like right at 35 feet with a flat roof for exactly what Kevin said. To have that view from the Future Art Center looking south, not be obstructed. And Garrett, I just sent you to, it wasn't in our packet, but another rendering of the river view. If anyone cares to look at that.
Okay. Anything else, Eileen?
I like the fact that it says that all comments shall be addressed prior to the final plat application. But I don't know if it's strong enough in the resolution.
Roy?
But that's it for me.
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to know how many comments we had is that normally I like to see them, how many comments were added to as conditions. So,
Yeah, it's a, good.
I can pull up that full comment letter if the planning commissioners would like.
Yeah, it starts on page 2 of 4. And there's probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I think it's document 19.
Yeah, 16 or 17 of them. They all say will do. They'll get it done. They'll get
so
it
we
finished.
could,
They're pretty minor stuff, actually.
Yeah.
Right, and just so they're done before the final
Yeah.
and before, I assume this goes to the board.
Yep.
it will, yes.
Yeah, because that has always been frustrating to me. When the same number of conditions get to the board that left the planning.
Yeah, right. It'd be
Right,
nice to have those
right.
completed.
So can we add that into the resolution? The number of comments that the planning staff has, as well as,
Yeah, so I have the resolution up in front of us right now. So item 1 must address all planning review comments. Item 2 must address referral comments from, and then it lists each of the entities. You know, I don't know if we can edit this to say, you know, prior or at the time of final plat submittal, if that makes the planning commissioners feel more comfortable with approval of this resolution. But I think that's a fairly minor edit to make.
does that sound good to you, Eileen?
It does.
Okay,
The only planning review comment, and it was actually a comment from Merrick that may extend past that because we need new survey data. Merrick had requested, we had put a level spreader for our drainage on our own site. And Merrick had requested that we bore underneath the trail for that drainage. And so I was out there with Tim Shank's guys today, and there's still like 2 feet of snow back there. So getting accurate topography and survey data to then incorporate that change in might be the only thing that's difficult before end of April meeting, just because of the weather. But I spoke with JVA and we're happy to do that. We'll do whatever Merrick requires, but that's the only thing I can think of that we might just not have accurate survey data to incorporate that one point into the plans before final plat. But the rest of those pages, we should have no problem incorporating.
Would there be a holding spot for that water before it discharges into the,
So it goes
Fraser
through
River,
a
hopefully?
vortex, it's a,
It's contact,
It
so
go-
I
it-
can,
yeah.
Okay.
I learned a lot about these. Yeah, it's a contact sifter vortex system, which, yeah, it's, if you want to go to it.
Okay.
We were pretty adamant about not dumping dirty water, which we think we all are. The requirement is 1 level. This is about 5 levels above from a clean water standpoint. Maybe not 5, maybe 3 above a clean water standpoint, which we're very happy and want to do.
Yeah, I was wondering what that was. I didn't know what that meant.
It took me hours to figure this out. So
I was like, separated model from what? Now I know. Thanks.
Okay, Joy?
So I did look at the response to referral comments, and it showed intent to address. Um, just wanted to make sure that intent to address that is done in writing, along with like the lighting plan and the landscaping to be code compliant, that it's in writing. Does that need to be put in the resolution?
I guess I appreciate the bringing that up. I would maybe just direct you to um, these general comments here, 1 and 2, for example. General comment 1 on the site plan specifically states to provide an exterior lighting plan that complies with, the relevant sections of our code. I think this is something that we would catch on the front end. So when they resubmit for their final plat, there's a period of completeness review. Really kind of an oversight on my end that it wasn't included with their preliminary plat submittal. And so if they don't provide that lighting plan, then we would force them to resubmit. They wouldn't have submitted a complete application, if that makes sense. So and I recognize that, the resolution is maybe kind of general, but the intent is to reference this, 30-page letter of comments so that the resolution itself is more brief, and just refers to address all of these comments. So
In writing,
yes,
right?
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Arnell?
I like it. I was with Eileen. My only hope was that we could see some commercial on the back, but I think they're doing a good job of making that piece not stand out. And we have, Sun River just up the street from it. And now I lost the other name of the other complex, but Sun River has a nice view. You walk by the fence and see the green grass, and it's nice in the summertime. So I think this will blend right into that. And
yeah, one thing I would add, thank you, Parnell, is if you want to pull up the site plan real quick, a few things that I think I wouldn't notice if I didn't spend so much time on this, but while spending time at a lot of the meetings on the rezoning and with town staff, there's a few issues that are going to come up inherently on Clayton Court that a lot of the public voiced concerns about. One of them was a wall of buildings. So what we wanted to do here was create depth. So you can see on the commercial, we created enough height to hide the townhomes, but not enough that you feel like you're in New York City. Second, which what we really like here is on the curb cuts. Since these are all small-ish parcels on Clayton Court, if you get a bunch of developers coming in, everyone's going to curb cut to get into their parcel. We designed this so if you're entering in for future development to the south, we can give them an easement, and it's going to be per code on that 26-foot entrance. We'll move our trash enclosure and hopefully keep this whole side of Clayton Court just with 2 curb cuts. So you're not walking on these beautiful new sidewalks and you have to keep going down and up. And credit to our architect and designers. We can hopefully, there's 2 more parcels that way. And as they get developed, you can enter on one side and exit on the other side or vice versa. And then just keeps the whole thing clean. So you have commercial on the front. We'll get some commercial on the river eventually. And I think it's just going to be a really nice addition. And then lastly, we took a little, I'd say, inspiration from the hot dog stand over in Winter Park. And what we've seen there is that people just like to gather outside when people are walking by on the sidewalks. So we tried to maximize patio space as much as possible. And when you get a chance, you can go down Fraser Avenue and kind of look where this is going to be. And it kind of creates that same effect that they have where, hey, people are hanging out on the patio. Maybe we should walk around. Maybe we should go to the next place. So there was a lot of thought behind how we're going to design this for future development and not just short-sightedness to, hey, let's get one on the board.
the only other comment, I know it's just a design so people can see it, but the glass on the commercial building, I don't know if you've been into the Birdie Lounge during the middle of the day, but it's a little warm in there. So you might want to think about something that helps with that heat coming off the
Yeah.
sun.
No golf simulators in a full glass building is a good lesson, but we definitely took that away, and having ventilation on both sides, and a few things we're working on with Birdie Lounge. But yes, that is a great point.
Okay, Margaret.
Yeah, I have a couple of comments. Can you hear me all right? I just want to be sure.
Yeah, you're
Yes.
great.
Okay. Yeah, so the first question I have has to do with the code. And do we need to amend the code so that we can ensure in the future that we do have commercial along the river walk itself? So that's question one. And the other question I had has to do with the setback from the river. I thought I saw that the setback's only 6 feet. Did I misread something? And I thought the setback was 30 from the high water mark. So those are my two questions about what we can do to make sure in the future we do have commercial on the river, because that is the one thing that Fraser has that will bring people to Fraser. That above anything else, in my opinion, is being able to sit out on the river. So again, I'm concerned with that, and also the setback was my other question.
Do you want to answer the first one?
Yeah, so, we certainly can amend our code to require commercial uses along the river. Maybe one thing that we could certainly discuss further as a planning commission is the option, right now it might be kind of difficult from the developer side to provide commercial uses on both Clayton Court and the Fraser River, specifically for these parcels that front both. We want to be sensitive and not provide too much commercial space. Right now I think the language is somewhat flexible in terms of activating uses along the street in Fraser River, but requiring commercial along the street. But again, I mean, that's certainly something we can look to change and workshop.
Yeah, I can jump in on the second one. To add to the first question too, I mean, from a developer perspective, we're definitely open on future projects, and especially if the code reads that the concern would be that we have to put in 10,000 square feet of retail on a small parcel and can't fill it. But if the code makes sense and we can put a reasonable amount of retail, we would love to put as much as we can on the river. On the second one, we're actually amending that. That's a typo. It's 6 feet from the edge of the path. It's 30 feet at the smallest point. Sorry, that's completely on us. On this drawing, it's 30 feet at the closest point, and then it goes up to, I think, 68 feet for this townhome down there. But we'll get that updated for the next one.
And
Okay.
to speak to the stream setback a little bit more, so per the Riverwalk district zone, and this is a requirement, I believe, in all zoning districts, the minimum stream setback is 30 feet. We can require a larger setback if we deem it necessary. Although it's not explicitly shown here, the distance from the stream setback to the high water mark of the Fraser River appear to be more than 30 feet. And I believe that may have been a condition or a comment on their site plan. Correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, but this stream setback that's shown here actually comes from the previous Clayton subdivision that required, again, it's shown 5, but it's actually 6 feet from the property line itself. So there's kind of two different stream setbacks that govern the property, and it appears to meet both.
Okay. All right. That's all I had.
Thank you, Margaret. Kevin, I just had one question. In general, I like the idea that you have here. I like the patio concept. My main question is, don't we have a trail on the north side of the building that leads down to the river? Would it make sense for the patio to be on the trail side rather than on the south side of the building?
It's a great question. We've moved this patio back and forth about 10 times. Yes, we originally had it on that side. The problem is it doesn't get as much sun. So we moved it back here to get more sun. After talking to Steve Fitzgerald and the Arts Committee, we are looking at potentially adding another door to the building on the trail side, so you can access that from what's going to be hopefully the Art Center promenade, and activates that a little more. The other thing we wanted to avoid with the future Art Center is if it's a loud patio for any reason, putting that in their face, depending on where they put the amphitheater, where they put that. We want the Art Center to function on its own for that aspect. So for that reason, we put it over here. It's an easy change, but we like it in the sunny side. It's a hot debate between Greg and I as well. So
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Kevin? If not, then we'll take public comments at this point. And I would ask that those people who would like to speak and make public comment, limit your presentation to 3 minutes and speak only one time, unless someone wants to ask you a question in return. But we'll have 3 minutes per person. And if you have persons that have spoken and made comment, and you have essentially the same comment, it suffices to say that you could just say, I agree with the comment that was made earlier. So with that, let me open it up for public comment. Do we have any public here that would like to comment? Do we have any people online? In the back there. Yes. And would you please, if you come up to the mic, state your name and where you live.
Hi guys, Brian Sarkvenik. I live in the town of Fraser. Yeah, I've had a chance to meet with Greg actually to talk about this plan because in the trustees meeting, I voiced that I didn't really love the plan. But I have kind of seen what they want to see in the overall of Clayton Court, and I think that it does work. I don't love that pinch point that it gets really close to the trail, but it's a tiny lot, and I think they are doing the best they can to accommodate what we're looking for. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks.
Any other comment from the public? Yes, please come up.
Good evening, Mark Wanning. I'm up at Cousins Point Circle. My only comment would be, with all these people you're going to put on this trail and the commercial, where are they parking? Is there parking been in consideration?
I mean, for this site, they are meeting the on-site parking that's required for the townhome and commercial uses. You know, I think parking is a big discussion for the Riverwalk district as a whole. As you know, we look to plan this area, I think a consolidated parking facility, likely starting as a parking lot that could then be developed into a parking garage, a structure, is the likely solution. But in terms of the size and location of that facility, that's yet to be determined.
There isn't a space now
Yeah,
that you would consider?
yeah, currently along the road, you'll be
Okay.
able to park, and then the land that's been donated to the Art Center is currently being used as the public parking spaces. So there's about 25 parking spaces there.
Well, but when the art center takes over, that will be gone.
Yeah, by that time we'll have figured out the parking garage and where we can find that to go. Hopefully, I'm thinking the Art Center is going to take somewhere between 5 to 10 years to get that money put together. So
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the public?
There's some online.
Someone online, okay. Who do we have online?
Bob Wolf.
Bob Wolf?
On YouTube.
Bob, go ahead.
All right, thanks for letting me speak up here. Just a couple items that I have on my side is, when is the town going to do a complete master plan for that area? We're going down this road designing a bunch of stuff or letting developers come in and design a bunch of stuff, we're going to start looking like Rome is up there in Winter Park, where we have 15 different designs coming in. So I think the town needs to get on the ball and have a master plan put together for that area. So all these developers that are coming in can look at these designs and say, okay, we want everything to look like this down here, and have a plan in mind to bring this whole Riverwalk district together. If we're not going to use the river, then we need to quit calling it the Riverwalk District. We need to call it the Clayton Commercial District, basically. So we need to have a master plan put together. The other item is, when did it become for mountain siding and look to start using standing seam bronze metal siding for all of our buildings in the mountain? Mountain decor to me is timber and wood and everything. It's what I built for the last 30 years when I was building. So where did mountain design start using standing seam metal for the architectural look? So those are my two items. And I guess the third thing I would like to do is the one plan that showed the landscaping on the river walk side of that building. I like to see that put in place. That building is going to sit 40 feet tall, as noted by the developer, because of the berm that stands right there on that corner. So with the picture that they had there, showed an abundance of landscaping on that hillside right there. And I think that the developer needs to pull through with landscaping right there to try and bring down the height of that building on that embankment right there that is on the right side of the path. Those are my three comments. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Bob. And very good question about a master plan for our community, for our town. I'm going to pass this over to Garrett because we do have some plans along those lines.
Yeah, thank you, Bob, and well, both Bobs for your comments. So in terms of a plan for the overall, Clayton Court Riverwalk District, that's definitely something that we, from the town side, are excited to get underway here very soon. The town board, I believe in late February or early March, officially approved funding for an update to our comprehensive plan. As part of that, we are going to do a, comprehensive visioning design for the entire Riverwalk downtown Fraser area. So there will certainly be lots of opportunity for public engagement. The town will be, meeting with landowners along Clayton Court as well, so that there's buy-off on this vision, and so that it develops in a cohesive manner. So I know there's a lot of people here in the room, a lot of people online, so certainly excited to have everyone here and then some involved in that process. In terms of, building materials, I do think that's a valid comment. I'm going to share my screen again and just pull up a couple things from our code. I will note that so within the kind of development site design standards of our code, we have a section on building design for mixed use and commercial developments. And I will, cede to you, Bob, that building materials under this item here, it doesn't, mention metal. It mentions stone masonry, exposed wood, logs, heavy timbers, stucco masonry. But we do have an additional section specific to the Riverwalk District that simply says building elements and materials should ensure that design within the Riverwalk District reflects the funky / eclectic nature of Fraser. That's obviously very broad and open to interpretation. The Planning Commission and Board approved, a similar material on the Kozliget Main development. So, I think, in my opinion, as town planner, this uses a similar kind of materials package as Kozlig. And I think the buildings themselves also have a bit more articulation to their facades and are really quite attractive looking.
Yes,
yeah.
go ahead.
I was just gonna address,
Could you state your name?
this is Greg Beckler.
Yeah,
I'm with
Greg,
Bison
thanks.
Investments. I was just gonna address your last point, Bob, about the berm at the back of the building. So it's tough to see from the plans, but on our civil plan, it's a little easier to see that that berm will sit, the natural berm will sit above the finished floor elevation of these townhomes. And we do plan to landscape that area as well. So the berm will sit a few feet above the finished floor elevation, and then we'll also have planting along there. And then the height of the buildings are really only about 35 feet. So it won't be quite as drastic as a 40-foot building above a berm, but rather a berm hiding a portion of a 35-foot building.
Thank you, Greg. Does that answer your question, Bob? Or questions?
Sure.
Well, it answers it to a point. Are you going to set that building down 2 feet from the height of that berm elevation? So is that the first floor elevation or the second floor?
Yeah, that's the finished floor elevation of the first floor. So the berm, when it carries south, is going to sit above that elevation. So we'll have an interior pathway inside of that berm. So that berm will sit higher than our finished floor elevation right there. And our drainage is designed to pull water north to south along our building perimeter to then drain out on the southeast corner of the site.
Okay, well, as I say, the drawing that you put up on the screen here earlier showed a lot of vegetation, trees, bushes and stuff like that. I would love to see that carried through on that berm instead of just looking like a berm full of grass as it does in today's state.
Yeah,
You
we
know,
definitely plan to improve the look of that berm. And even though it's not a requirement, plan to landscape it and make it look a lot better than it currently stands.
Good.
Okay,
Thank
can
you,
we
Gary.
have that in writing?
All right, thank you, Bob.
Landscaping is always one of those things that gets taken out at the end. Well, we can't afford it. We can't do this.
Well, this is just preliminary plat, so by the way, we'll have a chance to look at this again later.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Being no other public comments, then I'd like to ask the commissioners one last time if they have anything to add. We'll go in the same order. Eileen,
I do not.
Joy,
Nothing to add. Thanks.
Cornell.
I'm with Bob. I like the rustic look of things, so if you guys can make it look more rustic, all the better, huh?
Margaret.
Nothing further.
Okay. And as for me, I don't have anything further, although I do like the comment about there's nothing wrong with planting trees on a berm and adding some more lushness to it. I like that idea. Okay. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing at this time?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 All right, thank you. Motion carries. Okay, so do we have a motion to approve PC Resolution 2024-0301, recommending approval of Strom Townhouses preliminary plat and major site plan with the conditions listed in the resolution and specifically addressed earlier by Eileen?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes.
Figured that was easier than repeating all that.
Okay, well, thank you. Let's take about a 5-minute break and anybody that wants
Get
to
your breath,
stay
get
for our
ready.
next one or wants to leave, I give you a chance, and anybody that needs a bathroom break and get some water, We'll adjourn for 5 minutes and then come back. And we'll take up item which is a public hearing for Grand Park Planning Areas 1WA and 2W preliminary plat and final plan development plan.
Yeah. Get the back up.
Do we have a couple people in? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Bend together.
Yeah. All right. Come back to order.
Enjoy.
All right. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing regarding Grand Park Planning Areas 1WA and 2W preliminary plat and final plan development plan?
I so move.
Do I have a
Second.
second? Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, great. What happened to Joy? Oh,
Here
here
she
she comes.
comes.
We get your eye there, Joy?
Do you want to
right.
open the public?
The legal publication notice was provided in the packet. And we'll now turn it over to Garrett Scott, our town planner, who will present to the commission his report.
Thank you, Bob and planning commissioners. So item B on the agenda this evening is the preliminary plat and final plan development plan for Grand Park Planning Areas 1WA and 2W. So again, I'll kind of go through this more slowly. We can have some questions and discussion as we get through this for sure. But you know, after this presentation, the applicant will present, and then we'll open up to public comment. So just again, development overview. Applicant and property owners, Grand Park Development LLC. The development is located within planning areas 1WA and 2W of the Grand Park Plan Development District. It's an area generally bounded by Old Victory Road, Telemark Drive, Market Street, and Highway 40. The land uses that are specifically proposed through this application are 137 residential units, 601 lodging or hotel units, as well as 58,200 square feet of commercial space. The entirety of the property is zoned planned development. It's all within the Grand Park Plan Development District. And again, this request is the preliminary plat and final planned development plan submittal. So kind of going over a broader review and approval timeline of some of the past approvals within these planning areas. So June of 2005 is when the Grand Park PDDP was approved. August of 2008 was when the Village at Grand Park plan was approved. This is within planning area 1WA. July of 2015 is when the Willows at Grand Park was approved in planning area 2W. This is the duplex and single family homes, kind of off of Old Victory Road. November of last year is when Alpenglow was approved within planning area 2W. These are proposed condo buildings, kind of similar in nature to the Elk Creek condos. And then January to March of this year is when this application was submitted, referral review occurred, and we are now at the public hearing. Speaking of the public hearing, public notice was published by the town in the Sky High News and Middle Park Times on March 13th. This is just a snippet from that public notice that was in the newspaper. There's quite a lengthy legal description for the property, so this is just the starting and end of that notice, but the entire notice is in the packet, and the applicant mailed notices to property owners on March 8th, well in advance of the 2-week requirement. So this is a map of kind of the existing conditions within these planning areas. So kind of to the left of the screen, going from left to right, you can see the Fraser Medical Center, the Foundry, commercial buildings along Highway 40, including the Grand Park offices and general store and gas station, and then the rec center. These are all within planning area 1WA as it stands currently. And then up to the top right, this is where the Willows at Grand Park and then Alpenglow within planning area 2W are located. This map is from the final plan development plan provided by the applicant and shows what is proposed for these planning areas. So it's a mix of residential, commercial, and lodging uses throughout the 2 planning areas. Part of this proposal, as well as an extension of American Willow Drive from its existing terminus, kind of in the Willows Alpenglow area of planning area 2W, extending all the way to Highway 40 to the existing traffic signal at Rendezvous Road. So I think just, the staff report provided, as well as the planning review comments, the legal review memo, kind of touch on these as well, but I wanted to go over a few things at a very high level with this application and speak to kind of what is being proposed through this development. So one thing I want to speak to first is the concept of planning area density transfers. This is an allowed provision per both the 2003 annexation agreement of the Rendezvous and Grand Park properties, as well as the 2005 PDDP of Grand Park. This text here on the screen specifically comes from the 2005 PDDD, and highlighted is kind of some key language around the density transfer that density or uses within various planning areas can be moved between planning areas up to a maximum of 30% of the approved density of the receiving planning area. And doing so doesn't require a plan amendment so long as there's sufficient roadway, water, and sewer capacity. This text here says much of the same thing. This is from the 2003 annexation agreement. Again, kind of key sentence: densities may be transferred between planning areas up to 30% of the receiving planning area. It does say with a transfer application. I will note that I don't believe the town has historically required a quote unquote transfer application. But through the submittal of a final plan development plan and this request for a density transfer, town staff generally considers that to be encompassing of a transfer application. I think the key thing is that 30% threshold, as well as the requirement to have sufficient roadway capacity and water and sewer capacity in the planning area that's receiving that density. So this chart is more or less taken from the applicant's materials, and it summarizes, so planning areas are listed in the column to the far left. Then the next set of columns is what is approved in each of those planning areas per the 2005 Grand Park Plan Development District Plan. So for example, planning area 1A was, authorized to include up to 230 attached residential units, 300 lodging units, and 140,000 square feet of commercial space. All three of those values are proposed to increase by 30% through a density transfer from other planning areas. Those planning areas include 4W, 5W, 7W, and 9 and 10W. So, this table may be a little bit hard to decipher. So here's a nice visual image. I can go through all these. Apologies, I didn't realize these were on animated, but what this is showing for 1WA is that it's receiving commercial uses from 4W, residential uses from 5 and 7, and lodging uses from 9 and 10. And it shows you the general location of those various planning areas within Grand Park.
Excuse me, Garrett, can
Yeah,
I ask
absolutely.
one question?
Yeah.
Now, you've given us some language from two different documents,
Sure.
and we understand that there can be density transfers, but nowhere does it say anything about that requires additional acreage.
You're correct. That's the opinion of town staff, and I'll get to that later in the presentation. I
Okay.
kind of wanted to speak first to just density and uses, and then speak to acreage more broadly,
Okay,
if
great.
that sounds good.
Thank you.
So again, this kind of just helps to show visually where uses are being pulled from to increase the density within 1WA. And then next I have for 2W. I believe that's everything. So again, commercial is coming from 4W, residential is coming from 5W, and 10W is contributing both lodging and residential uses to 2W. Okay, So now talking about planning area acreages. So this chart comes from the 2005 Grand Park PDDP, specifically sheet 6. And it shows the key thing is the acreage is tied to each planning area. And everything kind of that's not within one of the planning areas above the subtotal, it's kind of by default included in what's called planning area 23W, which is a open space planning area. So one other key thing that I want to mention and share about this visual from the 2005 Plan Development District Plan. It has this map repeated on several different sheets that has what we've kind of been calling planning area bubbles. And these bubbles are not to scale, just simply put, which is extremely unfortunate because I think, we are all visual people, right? You look at this map and you have a preconceived notion of spaces that would be developed and spaces that would be left as open space by not being included in one of these planning areas. But just going down the list here, so I took this image, I put it in Google Earth. It's to scale. Everything is as accurate as it can possibly be. The total acreage of Grand Park is to scale on this map. But the scale, at least of these planning areas, which are kind of key items to consideration to consider in our discussion today, the size of these bubbles is not to scale. So for example, 1WA on this map, the size of that bubble is roughly 26 acres. It's approved 1WA to have 30.3 acres. And so on with other planning areas, 1WB, 2W, etc. But again, I want to note that the total overall area of Grand Park is to scale on this map, as well as that rectangle that's in between 4W and 3WA, kind of to the top left. That's the Summerall parcel, which is not part of the Grand Park PDD. The area of that rectangle is basically exactly 5 acres, which is the acreage of that parcel. So I think it's unfortunate that, again, the size of these bubbles does not reflect the acreage in this column that these areas are approved for. It could also be argued, though, that this map is intended to show intent. So, for example, 1WA does not go north of a proposed road that connects with Highway 40 at Rendezvous Road, for example. It's just something to consider, despite the smaller area of the bubble.
How big is the rec center parcel, for example? Is that 5 acres as well then? That looks about the same size as,
4.9.
Yeah, so the actual rec center parcel is 4.9. The rec center parcel is obviously not shown on the 2005 PDDP. You can kind of see where it is on this image, roughly where my mouse is.
The 4.9 acres for the rec center, I believe there was a resolution passed that said that could be added into an area 1WA.
well, normally rec centers and stuff like that would be put in open space kind of areas. It wouldn't necessarily go in a commercial zone.
So,
But however,
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a trade or a trade-off for that or not. I'm just asking because 5 acres is 5 acres. It's a lot of-
Right.
yeah, and I'll speak to that a little bit later in the presentation as
Okay.
well.
Sorry to
Um,
interrupt you. Thank
No, it's okay. Are there any further questions or comments on what's being presented here? Okay. So with that in mind, I think really town staff position is, at a minimum, to hold these planning area acreages to what is approved in the 2005 PDDP. This table here is taken from sheet 5 of the final plan development plan that was submitted by the applicant. And it clearly shows that the acreages that are proposed for these planning areas are larger than what's approved in the 2005 plan. So for example, planning area 1WA is proposed to be 34.4 acres versus an approved amount of 30.3. 2W was or is proposed for 44.4 acres versus approved amount of 33.8. And just by the nature of these planning areas' proximity to what surrounds them, as you can see on this map, you know, if you think about that 2W bubble getting larger than the 33.8 acres that it's allowed, that acreage has to come from somewhere. And what's adjacent to it is 23W open space, specifically Cousins Meadow. So anyways, any increase in this acreage results in reduction of acreage in 23W, which is, you know, the primary concern of staff with the application as it stands today. You know, the applicant provided a sketch plan for this area for review in September. Town staff provided comments back in October. You know, if I could turn back time, I would have elected to have that sketch plan presented to you all, the planning commission, as is an option allowed by town code. But the applicant did provide their response to the sketch plan comments in their application, which is in the packet. And one thing that the applicant, you know, likes to reference is this section from the annexation agreement regarding planning area acreages. Specifically, I mean, really the whole thing read together. The fact that these planning areas are not based on surveyed acreages, you know, the boundaries can be adjusted at the time of subdivision or FPDP submittal. So, you know, ultimately town staff recognizes that the boundaries of those planning areas are flexible. They can change, they can move around to some degree per this section. But, you know, I think ultimately what the applicant is proposing is an increase in acreage that kind of mirrors the increase in density that's allowed from the density transfer. So I think going back to here, you know, just doing some rough math, I think 44.4 is roughly 30% more than 33.8 in the case of planning area 2W. It's the position of town staff that acreage increase would not be allowed just by a density transfer. There's language here in the annexation agreement that reads the approved number of residential units or the approved commercial square footage shall be the controlling factor for any acreage change, essentially. You know, town staff believes that means approved, you know, approved uses prior to any density transfer, essentially. So, you know, if for some reason, let's just go back. Oh boy. Go back to here. If for some reason the applicant could not, you know, develop the 250 residential units, 278 lodging units, 30,000 commercial square foot within the planning area acreage already allotted to 2W, which was 33.3. Yeah, or 33.8, excuse me. Then they could likely receive some increase in acreage, but again, that's not what's occurring here. Are there any questions on this? Because this is kind of a key item.
Well, the only question I have on it is, in several meetings at the board and here, we've been told multiple times that those areas, the development areas, 1W, 2W, 4W, whatever, they're like balloons, so they can expand or contract depending on what you want to do. So if the developer reduces certain areas, that's going to create open space in other parts of the development. When I read the annexation agreement, it says that the town's entitled to 467 total acres of open space. Cousins Meadow's never really been defined of what Cousins Meadow is, which has been an issue. And if we resolve that, this wouldn't be such a heartburn for everybody. We wouldn't have such a contentious conversation every time we go to plat the meadow. But we haven't resolved that issue yet. So can the bubbles expand or can they not expand? Can they shrink or not shrink? Are they set in stone or are they not set in stone? Because I've heard several times that they can expand or shrink. So if you expand them, that's more acreage. So which is it?
Go ahead.
Do you want me to speak to that?
Sure, yeah,
Garrett?
absolutely. Thank you, Ken.
So great question, Parnell. And, really you probably read the comments back and forth between me and the applicant, and it kind of centers on these two provisions in the annexation agreement that we're arguing over, whether 4.2 or 4.3 applies.
Right.
4.3 is what Garrett was just referencing up there. Basically, that talks about how the density controls and the acreage can expand and contract, the question that you're asking right now. Well, the key to that 4.3 and what it's applicable to is approved densities for planning areas that exist as defined on the 2005 PDD. We're talking about something different here. We're talking about a density transfer. So we're not talking about expanding and contracting for an approved density. We're talking about a new bubble based on a density transfer of 30% increase. Therefore, you have to go to 4.2, and that's what governs here. And 4.2 says you can do that. There's a path forward, but you have to follow the rules. In other words, if what you're contemplating is going to change the use, and I know the applicant disagrees with me on this, but I'm saying it's going to change the use because of the expansion into another planning area, that being 23W, you have to go into this next process, which is if you're going to change the use due to a density transfer, you have to go through a major PDD amendment. So there's a path forward, but it requires a major PDD amendment.
Okay. And then across the street on the Coble side of things, isn't that commercial all the way down that road, way past those lights going south? Doesn't it go 15, 20 acres towards the ponds? Isn't that all zone commercial, 55 feet tall?
I can pull up the,
And the reason I
Yeah.
bring that up is we're gonna have, regardless how this comes out tonight, on one side of the highway, we're gonna have a whole bunch of commercial at some point in the future at 55 feet tall on the other side of the highway. On both sides of that stop, where that stoplight is going in the rendezvous entrance, both sides of that is zoned 55 feet tall, right? My understanding for commercial uses.
I'm going to pull that up right now if you can give me a second, partner.
Yeah, sure. Take your time.
Are you talking about the area that also has the Cousins Meadow Museum?
Yep. Everything right around there is zoned commercial, 55 feet tall, I think. Either 55 or 45. I thought it was 55, but
So what's being shared on the screen is the 2003 Rendezvous Plan Development District Plan. So it covers both sides of Highway 40. The 2005 Grand Park Plan essentially replaces this for anything west of Highway 40. But I guess to your point, Parnell, I believe you're referencing, planning areas 12E, 13E, and 14E,
correct.
because these all lie along the east side of Highway 40. So those are all, they were approved for, a mix of residential, lodging, and commercial, it looks like in these.
Okay.
But I know that these parcels have largely been undeveloped. I know there's the bank, I think it's in 13E.
Yeah,
Yeah,
12 or 13, yeah, 13 maybe. Yeah,
and
13
and
is-
the
13 fire station is then on the other side. of
on the
that.
other, I
Yeah.
believe the fire station's right here.
Right.
Yeah.
that's the fire station.
So
So that's all zoned for future commercial residential hotels as well.
it is, yes.
To the question of 55 feet, do we see that anywhere?
That should be on another sheet.
And the reason I say 55 feet, they had come in and talked about doing a LIHTC project there at one point for workforce housing. It would be, I think they were asking for a variance, but they were talking about 55 feet, 65 feet or something like that.
It's on the sheet. So again, it was planning areas 12 through 14E,
Yeah, 45 feet. Okay.
45 feet, yeah, in general.
Yeah.
So
So maybe they're asking for a variance of 55 feet then.
back to the presentation here.
So a question that I have, if you go back to the language that Kent was just
Mhm.
comparing and saying that because of moving into another planning area, it changes the usage, at least what you said.
Yeah,
So
okay.
if you go to the first one, basically we're transferring densities, okay?
Yep.
But not necessarily correspondingly acreage. So in other words, you could transfer densities without a 30% increase in acreages. You have in the PDD for 2005, you have designated acreages that go with densities. Now we're adding more density in there. So it seems to me like the first step would be that the developer would need to determine whether or not he can develop the full density that he's allowed with the 30%, up to 30% increase within the planned acreage that's been approved, within the PDD planned acreage that's been approved. If he can't do that for some reason, then it seems reasonable that then the acreages, these bubbles as you call them, could be flexible and could expand. But it would seem to me that the first step would be that we would need to see the plan that says, here's how I could develop it with the density and the acreage that's I've got.
I'm following. That makes sense.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
And if I can't do that for some reason, then we need to negotiate what the bubble could expand to.
Right.
I think,
Because it's not a new zone, it's an expansion of a zone.
Yeah.
Right? So, and that's why I'm asking the question. To me, reading the whole document this last week, and the 2005 one, it's not as clear as it could be.
no, it is.
Right.
This document could have been written a lot
Right.
better. However, it is what we've been using for the last 20 years. 20-ish years, 19 years.
And,
Math
and
might be off.
within this 1WA planning district, planning zone, planning area,
Mhm.
What's the height allowance in there?
55 to 75 feet from what I remember.
Yeah, so I'll
It's high.
Yeah, okay. So it would seem like you could go up without going out.
Yeah, but based on what I understand, they've maximized the height. They've maximized their parking or minimized their parking as much as they could by putting some of the parking underneath the structures of the buildings.
Okay.
Parking's our biggest, it's terrible, but parking is our biggest issue. It's the biggest thing that eats up land.
Right.
And we all keep hoping for the self-driving cars and all the electric world to take over, but we're not there yet. So at this time, we still have to be able to park all the commercial, all the residential units and all the hotel units.
So, speaking to the allowed height within 1 and 2W or 1WA and 2W, it's not entirely clear, but this is roughly where I believe Market Street lies today. So the intent is that, buildings in between Market Street and Highway 40 are restricted to a height of 55 feet. Those located behind can go up to 75. There is this 55-foot tall restriction on this little area here. And then, all of 2W can go up to as tall as 75, really regardless of where it is. So that speaks to the height restrictions. And this is kind of, maybe veering from the presentation a little bit.
Sorry, we
But-
messed up your presentation.
No, it's
here,
okay.
but-
These are all good things to discuss, but
Yeah.
yeah. And speaking to parking, if I can find the parking page, if this will load. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Sorry. So I'll locate the sheet. It's 18. Okay. So in terms of parking, the applicant is stressed that they've done, significant measures to reduce the impacts of parking by, so if we just look at this sheet here, these two buildings on lot 14 and 15, you can see underneath the building footprint, there's one level of underground parking. So, it's recognized that this is a, significant cost to the developer and a significant effort to try and reduce the impact of surface parking on the land area of their development. I will just note that, still they're requiring, well over the number of required spaces. So within this proposal, they're only required to provide 973. They're providing over 1,200. So I certainly think some surface parking could be reduced to lower planning area acreages.
Okay.
So.
Okay, you can get back to your
No, it's
presentation.
great.
I'm sorry, because but these are all important questions that
Right.
are gonna get discussed at some point during this meeting, so
Yes.
we might as well
We've got to
hit them
educate,
while we're going.
we've got to educate as we go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's do.
So I think at the end of the day, I would just stress that, again, town staff believes that these planning areas should stay confined to the approved acreages from the 2005 plan and shouldn't be expanded. Joy, you brought up the injunction related to the ongoing litigation around Cousins Meadow. This here is directly from the sketch plan comments, specifically legal comment number 7. This is on page 5 of those sketch plan comments. This is attachment 14. And what I've highlighted here is maybe one of the key things, which is a quote from Judge Hoke that reads, "Plaintiffs cannot build in Cousins Meadow absent an agreement from the town. If the town of Fraser doesn't agree, it ain't happening." So, an agreement from the town, I think town staff believes that would constitute, say, approval of this plan as is, but certainly town staff view is that the expansion of these planning areas constitutes building in Cousins Meadow, building in the 23W open space. Are there any questions or concerns about this? Okay,
Just
Oh.
one question.
sure.
If I read this, it says plants cannot build in Cousins Meadow absent an agreement from the town of Fraser. Wouldn't that agreement from the town of Fraser have to come from the Board of Trustees?
Yes,
It can't come from the Planning Commission.
correct,
So it's not our job to decide that tonight.
correct.
That's Board of Trustees issue.
We're off the hook.
We're just looking at what the Planning Commission or what the town staff has come up with as to why they are not in favor of the application as presented. Okay, go ahead, Garrett.
Well, the board can make decisions too.
Right.
Right.
But we could deny it.
I don't know if that would be the smartest thing we ever did, but seeing the situation we're in right now.
So you have more.
Yeah, I do. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
So as was previously mentioned, this is text taken from a resolution that the Board of Trustees passed in 2008. So, this predates my time here certainly, but my understanding, there's a provision in the 2003 annexation agreement regarding Grand Park providing land for a recreation center to the Fraser Valley Recreation District. And there was a timeline associated with that. I believe like 2007 was the deadline. And that time passed, and my understanding is that there were a series of failed ballot measures to help fund the construction of the recreation center, which again did not pass within the time frame per the annexation agreement. However, after that deadline, Grand Park still proposed and decided to donate a parcel of land equal to 4.9 acres to the recreation center. And it was agreed, between the town and Grand Park at that time, through this resolution that I think two key things. There's also a provision in the annexation agreement regarding donation of a 5-acre parcel to the town for a public purpose. So it was agreed that this land donation for the rec center doesn't satisfy that agreement, is my understanding. However, this item 2 is really a key piece of information here, that acreage in an amount equal to the site acreage provided to the rec district for the rec center may be reallocated within Grant Park, within either planning area 1 WA or any planning area west of the railroad tracks. So, this was something that was mentioned by staff to the applicant through the referral review process. And they have since provided a formal request for this reallocation of acreage. And there's two different ways to think about this. You can either say, if the town decides to approve this reallocation, then that 4.9 acres, either you can think of it as part of 23W and it doesn't count towards 1 WA, or you can say, well, the rec center site counts as 1 WA, but the total acreage of 1 WA is allowed to increase by 4.9 acres. So, again, a couple of different ways to think about it, but the function of this is, the applicant has made this request. If this request is approved as part of their application, then functionally the result is 4.9 acres increase to 1 WA.
To the 30.3 acres.
From the 30.3 acres. So the 30.3 acres is, so just kind of to highlight it where my cursor is, 30.3 is the amount per the 2005 PDD for Grand Park. That's the acreage tied to planning area 1 WA. With this reallocation, it could be increased to 35.2 essentially.
That's right. That's what I was trying to say.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, you're
Yeah,
good. Thank you.
So that seems reasonable. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
So I think also to speak on this, that formal request for the reallocation was provided just yesterday. So it was received 24 hours in advance of the meeting. I failed to update the packet in a timely manner, but I did want to include it in the packet just so there was some degree of notice for the planning commissioners and the public that request was formally made. And additionally, there are some other materials, maps, exhibits that the applicant provided yesterday as well, that they're likely going to present on. And I included those in the packet. Again, mainly just to try to give you all some degree of heads up on them before the applicant presents on them. But I just want to stress that, they were received yesterday by the town. We haven't had a chance to review them in great detail. So, certainly I imagine they will present on them, and, you are more than welcome to ask questions, but I think it's town staff's position that we refrain from any feedback, either in the affirmative or in the negative on what they're presenting in these updated land use exhibits.
All right.
So ultimately, for that reason and for many others, in the staff report, my ultimate recommendation was to continue this public hearing. Town code allows the planning commission to do so, to allow for a more comprehensive review of the project and to allow the applicant to make revisions or provide additional information as they already have been doing. I think it's going to, one, give us time to review the materials already provided. It will give us time to continue this discussion, ahead of hearing it again in April. So also to speak to this specific section of the code, if a vote to continue the public hearing is the ultimate decision by the planning commission, then the planning commission must resume the public hearing within 30 days, which would be by the April 24th planning commission meeting. The applicant may request a longer period. So it need not be resumed at the April Planning Commission meeting if the applicant doesn't want to do that. And, ultimately approval of the application is not recommended by staff at this time. We just think, we can continue to work with the applicant to address kind of these concerns. We believe that they are to a degree that is too significant to be included as a condition of approval. Two other options that were outlined in the staff report for the Planning Commission is a recommendation of denial of the application. A draft resolution was provided in the packet for this denial vote. And I just want to stress that this doesn't prevent the applicant from continuing to work with the town and achieving approval, so long as, our concerns and comments are addressed. And then the third option is to send this application and any approval or denial decision to the Board of Trustees. Ultimately, town staff didn't recommend this option either, simply because, town staff believes that, the decision for this preliminary plat approval should lie with the Planning Commission. And we believe it's kind of passing the buck to another entity that would have to go through this presentation. We've received several comments with regards to the timing of this meeting coming up close to the election. So, as I mentioned in the February Planning Commission meeting, there really won't be too much turnover of the membership of the Planning Commission after next week and after the results of the election. It'd be anywhere from 1 to 3 new members on the Planning Commission, just depending on how things go. So it's not turnover to a significant degree to where, say there's a new majority of membership on the Planning Commission, majority of members would still be here and would still have been, in attendance for this presentation. So that's another reason why sending it to the board is not necessarily recommended. So this concludes my presentation, and I know we had good discussion, but any further questions for me?
Well, not you are Kent, I guess. This board doesn't have the authority to, or this commission doesn't have the authority to make a bubble bigger or smaller. Is that your,
This board can recommend,
that we
but yeah, this board doesn't have authority to make those
change?
definitive decisions, yes. You can recommend to the Board of Trustees.
Right, because ultimately the vote is a recommendation for
Right,
approval or denial. So,
or continuance.
right, yeah.
Okay, let's allow the applicant, Mr. Lipscomb, you ready to make your presentation?
Sure. Thank you, everyone. Clark Lipscomb for the record. And thanks everybody for being here tonight. Nice presentation, Garrett and staff, on your part. And I think we agree on the importance of paragraph 4.2 and 4.3 as to how things are governed and managed in these PDDs, both at Rendezvous and Grand Park. And I've worked on these projects since 1999, and we've certainly on both sides of the highway have used these provisions regularly. We're not changing anything here. I think it's important to note that the PDD structure, which goes back a long way, is meant for flexibility and adaptability, and it recognizes market conditions will change or very long-term developments. So I just want to say that now. And I think what we're trying to do is do what's in the best economic interest of the town long-term, in that the logical spot for higher density and more commercial and more lodging is this area. Okay. And that's how it was intended originally as well. And we're just increasing it. What we did do is go through some quite big extremes. We never, frankly, this was prompted in part by the litigation that I think Joy referenced. I don't think anybody's ever done a study to analyze the units unit sizes and parking requirements in total. I know it wasn't done in '03. I know it wasn't done in '05. And I think that's why this very kind of broad-based language exists in the agreement, because nobody knew would it be a 1,400 square foot average condominium, or would it be 2,000 or maybe 1,000? Who knows, right? Nobody knew. So we've taken pretty extreme steps, spent a lot of time going through and really analyzing this. And one of my efforts, and you can see this throughout our project, is to maintain our 23W space. We've got 468.1 acres to provide in planning area 23W, and we will provide, our goal is to provide the approximate 468.1 acres that is in the PDD. And that's what it's always said. And with that said, 23W is not defined anywhere, and it's going to move around. It's going to float around. And as you establish FPDPs, and in this case, we've almost finished what we call the Grand Park Meadow property. You're going to hear Layla is going to do a presentation. And I like to reference it as our Meadow property, which is approximately 292 acres, which is everything from the railroad to the highway that we bought undeveloped back in 1999, from Winter Park to Fraser. And then we have our West Mountain property. Okay. And West Mountain's actually spoken to in the annexation agreement as well. But it's a good differentiator. Think about the railroad as the demarc. And 23W is on both sides. Okay. So in the '03 PDD, 23W was 466 acres. In the '05, it's 468.1. But it also takes out Leland Creek, where we put quite a bit of open space that's now in the town of Winter Park. So we actually, Grand Park, actually increased our open space quite a bit in the '05 PDD, particularly if you add Leland Creek dedicated open space back into this program to match '03. That said, continuing the effort to use the least amount of land and build very efficiently, and limit the horizontal use, I directed our planners, let's go down one level with parking. It's very challenging, very costly in this area. And let's go max height. Let's use the vertical mass that's there. And we use some very conservative numbers on unit sizes and unit mixes in an effort to really minimize the plan. And where we ended up is what was submitted to you all. We since had a meeting with staff last Friday to review this in more detail and go over these scenarios. And with that meeting, we went back and reevaluated further, which is, I think, what Garrett's included now in the packet, which is what Layla is going to present. I'll leave it to her to present that. But the net effect of it is we looked at overall open space and open space that's already been provided in certain planning areas like 2W, for instance. And we'd included portions of floodplain, portions of wetland in lots, knowing that we have required open space within the lots when we plat them. So you have 23W open space, and then you have open space within the lots. And we've already satisfied the open space in 2W. That's required. In fact, we're over that amount. And so she went back and revisited, and we made some push and pulls and some adjustments on various things and really tighten this plan up. And what she's going to present, you'll see that in aggregate of all the planning areas in the meadow, which is planning area 1W to 5W, we're under the total planning area bubble acreage in the plans, inclusive of the reallocation of the rec center. And just for clarification's sakes, that 5 acres was to be dedicated to the town of Fraser for public purpose, which would have been given to the rec district if the vote had passed prior to '07. The vote did not pass. The town board said, we don't want to give them the land. The rec district came back subsequently. We said, we'll do it. Okay. Leave the 5 acres out there for some future thing we'll mutually agree upon. It's still floating. And that still is outstanding. And the 4.9 acres that we donated was recognized in the resolution that's referenced in your packet in the letter that I sent yesterday, requesting that it be reallocated to 1WA. Okay. And I think what you're going to see is take the rec center out of the package, and everybody's probably pretty happy that's here and go, oh, well, there's not a big change. So anyway, with that, I'll let Layla Rosales with Terracina Design come up and do her presentation. And then I'm certainly here to answer questions for anyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Clark.
Thank you, Clark.
Good evening. Can you give me sharing ability? Where's sharing? Where am I missing it? Oh, share. There it is. Voila. Good evening, Layla Rosales with Terracina Design. Appreciate the time this evening. Good conversations, good discussions. The good news is that I'm going to come in here and I'm going to save the day. That's what I'm telling them. Not you, it's me. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start with, sorry, it's a little bit on a delay. So what are our goals? Why are we here? What are we trying to do here? And I think some of this was included in the PDD. Those of you who've been around a while understand and know, this village and this area location along Highway 40 has always been considered, the village, right? It's going to be this vibrant mixed use community or neighborhood. It's going to include lodging and commercial and hopefully be something that's pretty special for the town. So, again, one of the main goals is to continue that vision and create that vibrant village. To plan for the long-term economic development opportunities for the town, right? I mean, this is lodging and commercial are a big deal for the town as it relates to sales tax. I did some math. To develop and why now? What are we doing? We got to develop the lots to have some end users come in. So if we want a hotel, we have to have something to sell them, right? So that's kind of what we're trying to do. We're trying to tee this up so that we have something that we can then start to work with hoteliers and other end users to be able to build and make this a reality. And then finally, and this is probably going to be the piece that's most important to all of you, probably most of you in this room as well, to do that final definition of the boundary of planning area 23W east of the railroad tracks. So in what Clark just called the meadow, everything east of the tracks, between the tracks and the highway. So this is it in this area. So once we have this finished, that area will be defined. I know that Garrett shared this with you. This is the meadow, what we're calling the meadow. This is the PDD. And really all that we need to kind of look at here would be, again, going back to the acreages that are here. And what I kind of want to show you here is these are all the acreages. The 4.9 is included in here, right? Which is part of what he just talked about as far as the resolution for the rec center. So all of the areas that you see on this plan in pink and orange total 135.2 acres, if you just add the numbers that are on this plan. So keep that number in mind as I roll to the next slide. So as Clark said, after Friday, I've been busy trying to kind of push and pull and work around, what does this look like? How can we get these acreages back down to match the PDD while still keeping the density that we think is important to make this a vibrant village, okay? And so we pushed and pulled and dragged and dropped and all sorts of things. And so what you're looking at here on this plan is and I'm just going to kind of focus on the right side of the plan, which we're talking about today, which will be the blue and the pink, okay, which is 2W and 1W. And we were able to push and pull and take these planning areas to get us to less than the 135.2 acres, actually down by an acre and a half. So you're looking at 1WA as an example is 35.2, we're at 36. 1WB is 5.9, we're at 5. 2W is at 33.8, we're at 33.5. So if you kind of add actually, and I just pulled these numbers off of the approved FPDPs for all of the rest of these planning areas. And so with that, your 23W numbers actually go from 157.6 in the meadow area. With this plan that we're presenting tonight, it'll be 159.1. So we've actually given an extra acre and a half to 23W as part of this. In addition to that, We have, planning area open space, as Clark alluded to, which is kind of all the common open space that's required in each of the planning areas. And so that gives us a grand total of 183.4 acres of open space in this meadow. That's 61.6%. So something to think about as we're kind of working through this. So what does that look like? Or what do we think that looks like as far as other than bubbles, right? And so this meadow, this is kind of everything built out in the meadow. Some of it's built, some of it's approved. But what we're looking at here is kind of this area in here. So this is what this would look like. We removed some of the buildings and facilities up in here. We pushed and pulled and dragged and dropped and, like I said, did a lot of work on this. Oh, going back. Okay. Sorry. Density transfer. Actually, Garrett did a great job demonstrating where the density transfer was coming from, right? I want to kind of reiterate specifically on the commercial, right? 4W is platted as all residential. There is no commercial opportunities left in 4W. We're actually going to save 50,000, 51,000 square feet of commercial that it's gone, right? It's developed, and we're going to pull that over into this planning area. So we're going to give the town, hopefully, if all goes the way we want it to, that much more revenue, commercial square footage that would otherwise be lost because 4W has been platted and is under development as Elk Creek condos, as you guys all know that as. So I think that's important. The other thing that I think is important for this is, the lodging units that we're pulling down from West Mountain, 173 lodging units. Again, good tax revenue for the town. Yet the more consolidated, more people in a space, right? The more vibrant it becomes, the more people want to be there, the more successful the restaurants are, your retails are, right. I mean, it all kind of works together to create this vibrant community. So again, it's trying to pull some of these lodging units that were a little bit more remote, kind of bringing everything down while keeping the acre, actually, while giving 1.5 acres back to 23W. Okay. So here you go. Well, maybe. Go. I'm not patient. There we go. Okay. So again, what I'm trying to kind of highlight here, everything in green is all of the open space that is part of this meadow. So you've got 183.4 acres, 61.6% open space. And that is inclusive of the open spaces within, within the planning areas. I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but total open space for this area is 61.6%. And I think this highlights that well. And I do want to highlight, and I'll highlight this again, look at this nice big expanse of open space that's remaining as part of this, or as what is lovingly called the meadow. So again, just need to slow down. Again, all this is showing, or what I'm trying to demonstrate here, is these are the areas we're talking about today. So really what this shows is everything else that you see on this map is platted, approved, or built, right? So this is all that's left. There are these little pieces left that we're talking about tonight, and then we're done. I'm trying to be patient. Okay. This slide here is 1WA, and all I'm trying to do here is kind of highlight for you each of the planning areas and what we're showing in each of these planning areas for this purpose. So, and I made it really neon colored, which I think is kind of cool. So what you're looking at here for 1WA is 300, I can't even read that, 365 residential units, 430 lodging units, and 182,000. And this is grand total for the planning area for all of the uses within this planning area. 2W, same thing. I'm just trying to highlight all of 2W. You can kind of see what's built or what's approved, which is everything that's in gray here in the middle, which is 259 units, residential, both multifamily and single family. And then what we're talking about today are, again, the bright neon colors here, which are lodging and commercial. So, I kind of just want to reiterate that, kind of how we're in compliance with the code, which we strongly believe we are, especially with what I just shared with you tonight. Garrett did a great job, so I'm not going to belabor this too much. It's going to be a long evening, I have a feeling. Density transfer is allowed per section 4.2, which we looked at. The PDD, the permitted uses, we're staying with the commercial and the lodging and the residential units that are permitted. Density, 30% transfer, we're not exceeding that. And it's again permitted. Open space, we're meeting the open space requirements. Building heights, we're maxing those out. And then as it relates to the land development code, we're meeting parking requirements, no storage, landscape, infrastructure, water, sewer, roadways. Okay, so this picture is actually kind of cool, and I don't know how to zoom this in a little bit better for you. But I think what I want to say is this is demonstrating how we are, in fact, saving our meadow. And this picture here, it is inclusive of the development, of all the development that you saw on, bear with me for just 1 second while oh, come on, work. There we go, okay. So what this is if you see over on the far left, these are the new buildings that we're talking about in 1WA. And this is the meadow all the way around. These are the homes. This is actually a cool photo that we took with a drone, obviously, back in the fall. And takes you all the way over, shows you the homes at the Willows that are built, shows you Cousins Meadow neighborhood, even shows you the Meadows homes that have been under construction here. So I really want to highlight for those who, for all of us really, I mean, this is it. This is what our meadow is going to be. This includes all of the development that you saw on that plan over on the left side of the screen, okay? And this is a little bit of an illustration from, from the Foundry, I guess, kind of showing what this whole development could look like. More of that. Again, you can kind of see the meadow in the back of this, and I think that's important. You see all of the meadow back in here that's being preserved as part of that 23W open space, so that 159 acres that we referenced earlier. Again, this is a view looking south. So you can see the Wishbone Pond at the bottom of the page there, looking south over the meadow. And, our development is, the new development is shown there in the background. So again, want to reiterate one last time, the meadow is 292.8 acres. Open space is 183.4 at 61.6%. So with that, I know that I'm well aware that this is something that I've been scrambling on for the past couple of days. Last minute, I get that. I'm well aware. And, Garrett is just seeing this. Kent is just seeing this. They've had, maybe a little bit more time to sleep on it than me, but I don't know. So I'm well aware that this is new, that there's some work for us to do as far as kind of dotting the I's, crossing the T's, right? I would, I'm going to request it because it's what I'm here for. I would certainly love you to entertain a motion that, again, we're at preliminary plat. We've got to go through final, we come back. And the idea of preliminary is it's preliminary, we take feedback, we get comments, we fix it, and we come back at final, and that is what you ultimately approve and what ultimately the town board approves and gets built, right? So I would humbly request that the planning commission consider a approval of preliminary plat with the condition that we meet the acreage as presented or as on those exhibits that have been shared with you, and that we will certainly work with staff between now and when we come back for final plat on making sure that that happens. And staff would obviously have clear direction from you to make sure that that happened prior to bringing us back in front of you. So I humbly request that you consider that as an action tonight. And if you have any questions for me or details, I'm happy to answer them, as is Clark.
I have one. Could you go back to, I think it was maybe the slide where you showed open space?
Yeah. Give me 1 second.
And it looks like
There.
from what we have in our packet, it looks like on the north side of American Willow Drive,
Mhm.
which I understand has been a bit of the sticking point with this presentation or with this application, is you still show 3 buildings,
Mhm.
but you've eliminated the parking to the west of that.
And we pulled it down significantly as
Okay,
well.
so you basically have reduced that lot 23.
Mhm. Or is it 22? I don't have the plan in front of me, but yes, there was the,
23.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you look at the plan and it's hard to see on the screen, but in lot 23 there, you have the building
Mhm.
and the lot line actually extended a little bit further north of that. We actually took that lot line and brought it all the way down to the building, preserving that much.
Correct. And
additional
it
element.
also looks like you have taken out some of the acreage in lot 22.
Correct.
Because what I'm seeing is that the open
Correct.
space comes up to the back side of the second building
Correct.
in lot 22.
You got it.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've,
Okay.
preserved,
So
American Willow has more frontage of the meadow of that.
that
better.
does something for me a little bit, in that one of my concerns with, as the plan was presented, was that you know, lots of people have in love with the meadow and with the animals that we've had down there, and they talk about how they used to see moose and things like that. And one of the concerns I had with the plan as presented was that it appeared that we have no wildlife corridor
Mhm.
for the wildlife to get from the West Mountain area. We would typically come along. I'm not a wildlife expert, but I would think it would typically come along Leland Creek, come down through there and work its way into the meadow.
Yep.
And my concern was we're kind of breaking up habitat, and we don't have a natural wildlife corridor for wildlife to move back and forth. Because I think we all enjoy seeing the foxes hunting for the mice in the, springtime, and the moose occasionally in the meadow. So
Absolutely.
I applaud you for your work to try to reduce the amount of acreage there.
Thank you. And I think you're talking kind of this corridor here that I'm starting to highlight in
Are
the
you showing that on
red.
what?
In here where
Yes.
we've kind of opened up that corridor from,
Yes.
yeah. Yep.
Still gets a little tight right in there between the alpenglow and,
There's a little bit of a pinch point,
yeah.
but
At least it appears that it's opened up.
Mhm.
Now, what I don't see on here is, let's see, what you call lot 26.
Mhm.
Where's lot 26?
Is that the one that was up here?
Oh, yes, it's not there
It's
anymore.
not there anymore.
Okay, because that was one of my concerns. That kind of infringes upon or gets very close to what would be considered the wetland area in there, and the wildlife corridor.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's my question. Any other
Absolutely.
questions for Lola? Lola?
No,
I go by whatever. Call me Hey You. It's fine.
no, but just what you pointed out, they can't push the whole development to the south because of the wetland corridor and the water that comes down through there. So because of natural stuff, we have a fight of where that land can go, right? That's the problem, where the density can go. So.
Mhm.
And, think of, I do think considering the recreation center as 23W makes all the sense in the world, at least in my mind. I mean, that it's open space, it's a recreational opportunity. And so depending on how, you can look at it however you want to, but that's kind of how I look at it, is that recreation center is actually part of 23W as part of an open space and recreational opportunity.
Okay. Thank you. But stay put.
I'm not going very far.
I want to go around the horn here for the commissioners. I've sort of already asked my questions. So, Eileen, what would you like to ask?
Where is Byers Peak Metro District?
Byers View? Byers Peak?
Byers View. I
Byers
guess,
View
yes.
Metro District. It is actually right in this. Can you see my cursor at all? It's right in this area right here. Yeah, right adjacent to the railroad. Basically between the railroad and Old Victory Road. But that is a relocatable type of district or boundary, is my understanding.
In your views, did you have any 75-foot buildings?
I did.
And where would they be?
Again, the idea is to minimize the land that we're disturbing. So, 75 is permitted kind of all in through here, as well as back in here. And, these are my models, take them for what they're worth, but those do demonstrate pretty darn close to those heights. And the
So
mapping
those
stuff will
are
change.
primarily in what was 1W.5?
Yes.
Then,
And and yeah, 1W and 2W
and 2W.
in here.
part
Yep,
of
you got
2W,
it. Yeah, can go up to 75.
So on your current development that's already been done, where's the closest house? Do you know where the closest house is to this new development? We saw a lot of letters that were talking about this being in their view corridor and such, and
So the
closest finished house.
yeah, right in here. Yeah, these duplexes here in the Willows. And let's see, that is 120 feet for that parking lot. So I'm eyeballing this 500.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just using that parking lot as a metric of eyeballing that.
And they said higher than the meadow landed, right? They're up off the ground more.
They are.
Okay.
And then the Alpenglow apartments aren't built yet.
Yeah.
Joy, you have a question?
I just wanted to mention that because I'm not receiving planning commission emails. I have not received Clark's email from yesterday.
That actually went to Garrett directly.
So is that in the email that I just got a few minutes ago?
So I guess to clarify, so I updated the meeting agenda and packet to include, not Layla's presentation, but a couple of maps and exhibits. And, that whenever a agenda or packet is updated, it, sends out an email notification to all who are signed up to that. And I think, Eileen, just because you've been in the acting mayor role since just January and previously weren't necessarily involved in planning commission matters, you didn't receive that notification this afternoon that the packet was updated. But the email that I forwarded you before the meeting started was that notification email. And even if you just navigate to the packet online, it includes some of the materials shown today or this evening. Yeah.
Yeah, I did get mine this afternoon.
What?
I said I did get the emails this
Yeah, I got
afternoon.
it.
I
Probably.
just got it during the meeting.
Yeah.
Didn't even.
Well, I guess the disconnect with me is that I'm not understanding that 23W is clearly defined and that there's it's an influx and something that it needs to be figured out before anything could be recommended here. Just a thought.
This actually serves to identify 23W in what I characterize as the meadow property, the 292 acres. And 23W is a planning area with uses in the PDD. Okay, and it's defined. It's actually called out as facilities, golf course, etc. And it's not in the 05 PDD with definition on purpose, except for in the table as to the 468.1 acres. Okay. So this is a great exhibit to have in this respect. If you take all those planning areas, 5W, 4W, all the 3Ws, the 2Ws that say not applicable, that are completed, okay, and then add them to the balance of the 1W, 2W. In the 292 acres that I characterize as our meadow property that's in the PDD. There's 135 acres of planning area bubbles, right? That can be developed under the town's theory that we can't expand the bubbles. Okay. So rather than argue about what 4.2 and 4.3 means, we undertook this exercise and we're using 133.5 approximately acres of the 135 acres that are the planning area bubbles. The balance is 23W in the meadow property. So call it 159 some odd acres is attributable to 23W on this side of the railroad, which is also what that will scale to, or do the math if you want to do the math. So that's 1.5 acre bigger than what it is shown to be in the PDD area. Okay. So what this does is actually, and the reason that we did this was because of the litigation and because of the undefined, where is the meadow, right? The meadow was taken off the plans in 05. And what we're trying to demonstrate here is development of these planning areas in full to what we think is reasonable and logical today. Move forward with platting them so that we've established the boundaries, Joy, of 23W down here. Okay. Now, as we go up the West Mountain, there will be 309, 302. I can't, off the top of my head, there's 300 plus acres of 23W in West Mountain. Okay. And that is still intended to have golf and other, very specific here. It's really intended for facilities. Like that's why we like to characterize the rec center as kind of being appropriately applied to the 23W area, which recreational open space is more or less how it's defined here. It's private recreational open space. Okay. All of the public dedications are very well outlined, and predominantly the Fraser River corridor that we gave roughly 57 acres, 4E, that rendezvous ultimately dedicated, public dedication, public park to the town of Fraser. This side of the highway was all predominantly private open space because of the golf and because of the recreational attributes that were planned there, et cetera. And so we're preserving and maintaining all of that and then some in this map. Okay. That's what the effort that Layla's does and effectively achieves this density in less acreage than what's on the PDD for the developable areas. Okay, so we're trying to get past, why argue about 4.2 and 4.3 if we can tighten it up really tight and make it work? That's what we did here. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Clark. And I do appreciate your focus on, creating open space. It's the injunction, the ongoing litigation, I think that gives me pause in approving anything. I do think that the conversation could and should be continued to gain more information, to come to some agreement on a lot of these things that are unclear currently.
Thank you, Joel. Cornell?
Well, there's a letter back in 2022 from Scott Albertson to Kent Whitmer, and my knowledge, this hasn't been denied by anybody. So it's the vested rights, and they're limited to a specific set of set forth in section 15.2. If you boil them down, it comes to two things. One being that they have a certain density they're allowed to do, residential, commercial, and lodging. They're allowed to do, and the second part of it is we're not allowed to do any downzoning of that. We can't reduce the densities that we promised them back in 2003, 2005. So when we look at that, the issue I have with all of this is, in the state of Colorado, one of the things that's protected is people's vested rights. And it's revised statute title 24, article 66, which defines It has the authority to undertake and finalize property development and usage. Vested property rights ensure that property owners can rely on approved development plans, granting them certainty to proceed with their projects despite potential changes in zoning, regulations, or other land use policies. This legal concept is crucial to developers and property owners, offering stability and security in the planning and execution of development projects in Colorado. So if we have their vested rights, and we go by the Colorado statutes, Title 24, Article 68, if we can't fit these in the bubbles have to grow. And I don't want, if we could keep everything south of, is it Willow Drive? Is that what it's called?
American
American
Willow.
Willow Drive. That would be my preference. If we can figure out how to do that, that would be great. Right now, I don't see how we can do that. I'm looking at their building heights. I don't want to tell them they can go higher on all the buildings. I like the shorter building at the front and 75 in the middle, right? I like the meadow. It's what I grew up with. But I don't want to be in another lawsuit either. I don't want to have another argument. I don't want to waste more money and time fighting what's going to be their rights at the end of the day, because they're vested rights. And it's why I'm in real estate. I love land, and I love the way people have ownership in the United States, and part of that, it comes with the vested rights. I mean, I'm sure all of you don't want somebody to come to you and tell you that your house, you can't put on a bedroom, you can't add a deck, you wouldn't be allowed to rent out a room if you needed to. Those are all vested rights that we have that people are trying to chip away at. They are trying to take those away from us. So that's, my preference would be kick this up to the board. Maybe with a neutral, no denial, no approval, but we kick it up to the board, because the board's the ones to make the decision on how big the bubbles can be. We don't have that power, so it's hard for us to say, hey, this is great, let's move it forward. But we also don't have the power to deny it because of the vested rights that they were given.
All right, thank you, Parnell. Margaret, we haven't forgotten about you.
Yeah, I've just been listening, and I tend to agree with Parnell. I think one of the problems is I'm just now really looking at this. I haven't really looked at the new plan, and my first reaction was, let's continue it, give us time to review it a little bit further. And I also have a question, what happens if the town, and maybe the attorney can help us here, what happens if the town wins on that lawsuit? What happens with this? I'm a little bit unclear about that.
Sure. So there's kind of two paths here. As Judge Hoke said in her order at the preliminary injunction hearing, nothing's going to happen without agreement of the town of Fraser. So that's kind of what we're here tonight, is to decide whether or not the town of Fraser is going to allow something to happen in that meadow or not. I've advised on the issues from a legal perspective, both in writing and tonight. But it's really ultimately up to the town to decide whether or not they want to agree to this or not. If they did elect to agree to it, I'm not sure how that would play into the settlement or the lawsuit. I mean, and what I mean by that is if it would maybe terminate it early because there'd be a settlement. I imagine that's a possibility. But let's say that that wasn't the case and the litigation continued. There are other issues in the litigation that would still need to be resolved. For example, even if the town approved that development bubble north of American Willow, there's still the issue of what is going to happen to the remainder of 23W in Cousins Meadow. It's zoned open space now. The lawsuit will determine whether or not it's going to be required to go into a conservation easement, which is a more perpetual protection for that area. So that's kind of a long answer, but I think that both things could happen on a parallel path. And you could, it not, one doesn't preclude the other. Does that answer your question, Margaret, or did that just confuse you more?
It, I'm not, well, I'm not, I actually am not sure. I guess
Okay.
just confused. It's parallel courses, but I mean, if the town would approve this plan that we're looking at, then it seems like then that solves some of the litigation at that point.
Well, the litigation has other issues besides just the Cousins Meadow issue. So I guess the short answer is no, it would not
It doesn't.
necessarily resolve the litigation. There, I mean, by other issues, I mean, there are other claims in the litigation besides the issue as to whether Cousins Meadow should be put into conservation easement.
Okay. I'm not, I guess I should look through that litigation, but I haven't, so I don't really know what all the issues are there. I'm kind of at a loss here. I don't know what to do with this. So I think from my perspective, I think I would favor at this point a continuance, to have a little bit more time to look over this. My gut instinct is I agree with Parnell, with what Parnell was saying. But I personally would feel more comfortable if I had had more than a few hours. And of course, I've been on the road. I haven't had any time to look at it. This is really the first time I've looked at it. And that's not anybody's problem but mine. But I personally would like a little more time to digest all this. But so that's, I don't have any questions. I think you've done a good job of meeting the requirements, keeping the bubbles, kind of the same size. So I don't have a problem with that. I'm just haven't had enough time to really digest it and review it. So my vote would be at this point, a continuance, that's my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. I think what we should do now is open it up for public comment, and same rules apply basically as we had before, which is we'll take the public comments. We'll limit those comments to 3 minutes. You'll only speak one time unless you're asked a question by one of the commissioners. If a person has already made a comment regarding what they want to say, then you could just say, I agree with what's previously been said. And I know we've had a lot of emails flying around today. My inbox, I've had more emails today this afternoon than I've had the whole last month, I think. So there's a lot of sentiment around this issue. And I think we'll do that. We'll start taking public comments now. Those in the room, raise your hand if you want to. Peggy.
My name is Peggy Smith, and I live at 1395 Pioneer Trail. For those of you who do not know me, I was mayor from 2012 to 2016, on the town board from 2010 to 2016, and on the planning commission from 2006 to 2016. I'm going to pass out the 2003 PDD. So you guys, I consider that the governing document because the 2005 PDDP used what I will call graciously architectural license when they whited out 23W from the plat, and they also removed the conservation easement and the Cousins Meadow open space. So I'd like to really have you guys focus on that and take it home and put it someplace where you look at it every day. I suggest a refrigerator. So I believe Cousins Meadow is the crown jewel of our community. If we are going to sell our crown jewel, what is being offered in terms of cash for offers or community benefits to the town as part of this significant zoning request? I have been told that cash proffers and community perks are typically provided in a massive development-led zoning request, zoning request. Frankly, I have never seen open space rezoned upon a developer's request at all. I don't know if you guys ever followed what went on in Denver with Park Hill Golf Course. That went to a vote for the entire city. The pure purpose of an open space is for community benefit, whether it's for views, conservation, or community use. Everything was negotiated when the value was exchanged 20 years ago. The developer got what he paid for back then. He should not be able to freely negotiate for more today, at least not without significant benefit being provided to the community. As you know, the conservation easement and the open space is currently under litigation, and Judge Hoke's temporary injunction should review ruled that the town would cause irreputable damages to any third parties, including subcontractors and real estate agents, if the entitlements were not reinstated. Judge Hoke specifically stated that she believed the town was capable of not approving any development in 23W while this lawsuit was either negotiated or settled in a trial. The trial has been set for April 26th. I hope you will deny the preliminary plat and a final plat development for planning areas 1WA and 2W. Thank you. And if any of you would like some of my stickers, I am passing them out to everybody. So you can actually find out all the documentation on my website. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy.
Thank you.
Back here? Yes.
Yeah, I'm Mark Wanning. I live up on Cousins Point Circle. And this is kind of from a resident's point of view. I look down on the meadow, which isn't the same as when we first moved here. And it is completely, it looks like to me it's suffocating the whole meadow. There really isn't much of a meadow left anymore that you can enjoy. At one time, we were allowed to go down there, use it, fish. There was a track you could run around, and we can't use that. So I don't know why it's called open space if you aren't able to use it. I mean, is it just to look at? That kind of offends me a little bit. And the other thing is that on that, I think on the application, there's some kind of term, they want 58,000 square feet of commercial. Is that including those two ugly yellow buildings that are sitting there empty for 5 years? And are these going to sit here empty for another 5 or 10 years? I would consider that a little bit, unless there is somebody that he has coming in that I don't know about. But I just don't think that that's a good idea to keep plugging that whole area. I kind of liked it the way it was. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Yes. Please approach the mic.
I'm Deborah Schulman and I live at 192 Mountain Willow Drive, so I'll be very affected by any development that's in there. We've owned property in Fraser since 2006. In 2016, looking to upgrade, we saw a lot in Grand Park right on Cousins Meadow. In the Grand Park sales office, there was a map on the wall depicting Cousins Meadow open space, the whole open space. And we were with all the recreational opportunities. Lisa Steckler assured us numerous times then and when we signed the contract that it would be open space into perpetuity. And Clark Lipscomb was present at least once. That map is why we bought in Grand Park. What we didn't know was that even then, Mr. Lipscomb was planning to develop the meadow and was playing games with the town, like leaving the meadow off of documents that he filed. This despite signing a legal agreement designating Cousins Meadow as conservation easement open space. For many years, he continued the charade and used Cousins Meadow to sell his properties. We moved in January 2018 and spent the next 2.5 years walking our dogs, hiking, biking, skiing, running, looking at wildflowers, wildlife, and the glorious views. Then in the summer of 2020, the fence went up and hundreds of head of cattle were brought in. We watched the meadow being destroyed by the cattle and moose fenced off from their food source, the willows. This is why I'm here today, because this open space is important to our community. It's an important asset for our community, the whole open space. Right now, the way this is proposed, I'm going to be looking out at 75-foot buildings. This is a city. That's not appropriate for a mountain town. While Clark claims private property rights, all conservation easement open space is on private property. Landowners get substantive tax breaks, and he signed that annexation agreement. He never intended to honor it, just like he hasn't honored agreements on the retail shops on Highway 40. He cherry picks the annexation agreement for things like the excessive heights on buildings that block view sheds. And now he is trying to develop the meadow. What I can't understand is why the town is wasting our taxpayer money on this hearing when there is pending litigation over the conservation easement open space. That should happen before any decisions are made. Besides, before approving any more massive development, what Fraser needs is a comprehensive plan, a plan. So I ask you to reject this whole development proposal. Thank you for listening.
All right, thank you. Anyone else in the audience before we go to our public online? Who do we have online?
Let's keep it civil in the audience, please.
Yeah, I think, let me just say one thing. Part of the litigation that we're involved in is to define what is owed to the town as a conservation easement versus open space, because they're two different things in reality. You can have conservation easement and you can have open space as part of development. And I think the issue that I believe that we're waiting to hear settled, aside from some of the other side issues, is what is the requirement for the developer to give the town of Fraser a conservation easement?
That is correct.
And so, that's not something we can decide here tonight. All we can do is take what we have as our role and our duty as a planning commission is to take applications as presented to the town staff. If the town staff says that they have met all the requirements for an application to be complete and they schedule it for our review, we're required to review it. Now, the litigation is something separate from what we're going to decide here tonight. And I understand that Kent's made a point that he's not particularly in favor of us making any decisions that might go against us in the litigation situation. But whatever we decide here can't be approved until the Board of Trustees has taken it up. So, we're gonna let the public have its say because we want to hear it. We really do. But understand we have limits to what our role and our responsibilities are tonight. Let's see, do we have someone online? Oh, I'm sorry, we have somebody in the back. Oh, you again?
Me again. Brian Cirkvenik, I live in town of Fraser. I wasn't going to speak because I didn't have much more to say than what has already been said, but I would echo what Deb Schulman said, that we were enjoying that meadow for a long time, and I understand property rights and Clark can put that fence up if he wants to. But what we need to consider is the intent of that PDD, the intent of 23W, the idea that the town wanted this meadow. They wanted this view shed. They wanted space for wildlife and to be able to, see Byers Peak from Highway 40. And the images that I just witnessed were atrocious. You wouldn't be able to see anything. I mean, I'm so against this, and that's even before I even consider the litigation that's going on. So I would say you either deny or continue, and let's let the litigation decide. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
All right, now, Antoinette.
Brian Kelso, you'll be up first.
Hello, yes, I'm Brian Kelso. I'm a property owner at 151 Telemark Drive, the former Kings Crossing in the Kings Crossing solar townhomes. And while I have some concerns about the nature of the development, particularly I wanted to speak about that it's just long past due that the unfinished commercial and retail development in Grant Park and US 40 is addressed. And an unfinished building left to rot in the element for 4+ years is an eyesore that presents safety issues, and it's unwelcoming. This is the first thing that people see when they enter the town of Fraser. And I would urge that the town and this commission not approve any development until a solution between the developer and the town has been made regarding these unfinished buildings, and that they've been completed or demolished. And it's past time for the town and the developer to pointing fingers on who's at fault for particularly those buildings, uncontrolled circumstances, et cetera. But they just need to be torn down and dealt with. And they must move forward with a solution to address this long-standing eyesore as soon as possible. And approving any additional development of Grand Park, let alone allowing new construction prior to these incomplete buildings being addressed, is irresponsible and frankly ridiculous for the town to be considering. Thank you.
All right, Brian, thank you. Although we weren't convened here tonight to talk about those two buildings that you considered to be an eyesore, we are so noted your concerns that it's not part of our responsibility to negotiate that at this point. We're taking the application as it's presented and determining whether we move forward with it, continue it, or deny it.
And just for clarification, Bob, it has been mentioned that those buildings will be starting work on May or June of this year. So those yellow buildings, white buildings, whatever you call them, will be completed. Off-white, there we go. The off-white buildings will be completed, hopefully by the exteriors, some by the time of the end of 2024, and the interiors based on when they get leased out, because they'll be built for whatever businesses go in there, be it a restaurant or I don't even know. I can't even think of other businesses we have right now. Anyway, those buildings that issue has been resolved for as far as I know.
Ann Millman.
Yes, thank you very much. This is Ann Millman. I live in Cousins Point. And to follow on to Brian Kelso's point there, I think those buildings were represented as the quote vibrant village in the presentation. And I do think it's relevant that when we're looking at the decision to build 58,000 more square feet of commercial building, and is that appropriate? With all the excuses of why the others couldn't be filled and why they haven't been finished, obviously the residential property is much more lucrative. So I do think it's worth considering, what is is this acting in good faith to put in commercial real estate when the others, for whatever reason that I'm not sure of, can't be finished. I share others' concern about the encroachment of the meadow. One of the huge attractors to us was, the wildlife and such. And this is a very off, maybe down a rabbit hole, but I understand it is Mr. Lipscomb's right to have fenced in the meadow. But having heard of moose not being able to get through there, I'm just going to throw out the possibility of taking down chunks of the fence when the cows are not there. So yeah, I know that's off topic, but thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Ann. Next.
Willows resident.
Hi, yes. I am going to just start by saying, this is not what we were sold. We were also told that it would remain open
sorry.
space.
I'm sorry, could you state your name and where you live?
I'd rather not, thank you. I do
You'd
live,
rather not state your name or where you live?
I live in the Willows. Is that enough for you?
Okay,
Thank you.
get to your point.
I would love to. So we were sold open space for our kids to enjoy, for us to cross-country ski, running, playing, exploring. What we were sold by the builder and his team, that is being encroached upon. And all of us would be remiss not to discuss the yellow buildings, because that is what we walk into as we walk into our neighborhood every single day. So to continue entertaining building with this developer feels insane. In addition, Parnell mentioned that the vested rights of the developer, but what about the rights of the homeowner who was sold the view of the Continental Divide, which will now be blocked by buildings upwards of 70 feet? So there needs to be a better explanation and who works for who.
All right, next.
John, you are up.
Hey, thanks for having me. My name's John. I'm in Cousins Point. I wanted to expand on Brian Kelso and I think Ann Millman's point. For me, it's a matter of trust. Those buildings are, I'm on my phone, so it was hard to see the plans in full, but I believe the yellow buildings that are styrofoam were shown on the plan. And so I think for me, it's a matter of trust. This developer has done nothing with them for years. It is an absolute eyesore. It's a disgrace to the town of Fraser. And I think that if we're going to continue, hearing plans from this developer, we need to understand why this has been allowed to go on this long. And we need to, like as Brian said, that needs to be closed out before we do anything. So I strongly urge at least a continuation tonight until the Planning Commission is completely present. This is a really complex issue, but also until the litigation plays out and until there's some progress on those buildings, because it has been so long with absolutely nothing but them just fading in the sun and being an eyesore. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you, John. Next.
Amanda.
Hi there. This is Amanda Prager. I'm in the Willows, I think, or yeah. I would tend to agree with all of the comments from the local residents. I would like to simplify things even more and just draw everyone's attention to the resources that were put forth through the litigation. I can't remember if it was 1 or 2 years ago, but I attended all of those hearings. They were several hours long. That was just an incredible outlay of our community's resources. In going through that, I think it would be just a complete disgrace not to let the litigation shake out and resolve before you even spend your time, your valuable time on plans. I'm just talking about all of your time, all of our resources as a community, and I think you should represent the community. You should spend time hearing from local residents. And I think that the litigation, more than anything, is really digging back to the original intent of that space. And we are talking about nature in this state. And I cannot believe we would think about putting hotels, parking lots, and roads out to the Highway 40 on space that was originally intended for our treasured wildlife. That's all I need to say.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. Next, do we have anyone else? Okay. Tia?
Sorry, I couldn't find my mute. Hi, I live at 48 Blue Stem Court. I do
live there with my husband and my 2 kids. We purchased in 2017, and I think for me, a concern is very local to just our little cul-de-sac. If you look at the renderings that Layla showed, they show ponds flanking our cul-de-sac. Those ponds continue to be vacant, places where dogs go to the bathroom and where people drop trash. So with that being said, it's hard to trust and believe that the yellow buildings are going to start to be completed in the spring, because we've been waiting for those ponds to fill for 5 years. And again, those ponds were part of the land we were sold, in addition to the views and the access for the open space. The ponds were a big selling point for us to buy in that cul-de-sac, to back up to the land, and then to have that water right there. So I just think a little bit of faith has been lost in what. Oh,
Go ahead and finish your
I
sentence.
was gonna say, I don't think that was 3 minutes.
It wasn't.
Okay, thank you so much. I just simply want to say that it has felt a little bit of a bait and switch of what we have received versus what we were sold. And I understand plans change, but we were told that was a golf course, and that likely would never be developed into a golf course, but that would be the only option, what would be what we backed up to. So we did pay a premium to be in that cul-de-sac, to back right up to the space, knowing that the only thing that might butt up to us would be a golf course, which was fine for us. We don't play golf, but it didn't feel like it was going to kind of take away the land, if you will. That's it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for your comments. All right, is there anyone from the public that would like to speak before we move to close the public hearing? Anybody?
I don't see anybody else online.
Okay, hearing none.
There's one hand up. Is
Oh,
that,
okay, hand
is
up.
that a,
Oh, I apologize.
Rich Miller. Rich.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to echo many of the comments of my neighbors in the Willows. I don't need to take up more time reiterating everything here, but I just want to say I echo so many of the comments that have been made tonight. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Rich. Okay, we've taken public comments. Do we have any further discussion from our commissioners here?
So we need to close the public hearing.
Pardon?
Do we close the public hearing first or not?
I would move that we ask the commissioners if we could take a vote on closing the public hearing at this point.
Motion to close the public hearing.
second?
All right, all those in favor, commissioners? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the public hearing has been closed at this point, and I want to thank everyone from the public who both came here in person tonight and joined us via Zoom. Your input to us is important, and we're trying our best to follow what we believe to be our role and our responsibility, and we'll only defer when we feel like it's not within our purview to make decisions. So I hope everyone feels like they've had their chance to speak tonight. I'd like to have the commissioners now discuss how we move forward with this application. Eileen?
How we move forward?
Well,
Okay.
in other words-
I wish the board trustees from 2003 and 2005 were here
To defend themselves? To help us out?
to state, yeah, what their deliberations were, and I'm sure they worked hard on it. And I'm pretty sure a vibrant community down in the meadow was not part of it. the density transfer from outgoing areas to what we don't know yet is the conservation easement and the highway view, which is further blocking of the open space vision, which was already reduced by 50% in my estimation. The Board of Trustees has been pretty emphatic about a bubble not crossing American Willow Drive. And the commercial from 4W can be somewhere other than on the highway. And the judge granted the injunction for construction for areas outside the conservation easement, which is to be determined. And the trial was set for April 24th, but it's being rescheduled already. That'll be decided next Friday, how far out that'll be. And so I don't think we have the time to keep pushing it down the road and wasting people's time.
Yeah.
Amen.
All right. Joy, do you have anything you'd like to discuss with the commissioners?
Well, the reason why I asked that original question, if this was an appropriate agenda item, is because of the injunction. You know, there's some historical context and some complexities here that we don't have all the information for. Even if we continue, I think it should be a continuation until after the litigation has been decided, and then it's appropriate for the Planning Commission to make a decision whether or not it should be approved to the Board of Trustees, in my opinion.
Is it possible to continue it till after the settlement?
It would be, right? Because it'd be the 27th.
So I guess,
We'll let Garrett
ahead,
answer
Garrett.
that question.
so our code states that the Planning Commission, if they choose to continue a public hearing, they must resume the matter within 30 days unless a longer period is requested by the applicant. But I don't think there's anything preventing the Planning Commission from, so let's say you all vote to continue, we resume the matter in April, you could vote to continue again, is my understanding. And then just delay to May to June, 30-day continuances, is my understanding.
So we would do monthly continuance until the litigation is settled.
Or an agreement is reached between Mr. Lipscomb and our trustees who have been in negotiations for settlement. I mean, it would be possible that we could resolve what the open space might look like, but we can't resolve how much of it is conservation easement. That would require litigation to
Yeah,
be settled.
so there's several paths, and I probably didn't articulate it very well when I was asked this question previously, but one path is like you suggest, Bob. There could be a settlement to the litigation, and that would resolve this issue as well. But this issue could proceed on an independent path too. And it should be considered pursuant to the judge's order in accordance with our code, in accordance with the annexation agreement, in accordance with the PDD. So if it complies with all of those requirements and those documents and those code provisions, you could conceivably approve it. Okay. So that's a separate path. And that would not be inconsistent with the litigation occurring at the same time, because as I said, there are additional and separate issues being litigated. Like what you would be deciding in this context is whether or not you would allow these development bubbles to be platted in these areas in this size. What the litigation is focusing on is what's left over, what the balance of 23W looks like after that approval, whether that would go into conservation easement or remain as open space zoning. Okay.
Okay.
And so I don't think you can necessarily, I think you have to process this application like you would if there weren't the background of the litigation.
Correct. I
But
agree.
that doesn't mean that it automatically succeeds. It has to comply with the provisions of the annexation agreement and the PDD, which in my opinion, it does not.
Okay. Parnell?
Well, quite a bit of stuff. So the map that Peggy Smith handed out, the American Willow Road is on that map. Also, the 1WA is larger on that map than what it is on the 2005. There are 3 golf course holes within that open space on the meadow and the map. So that's just so everybody's clear, what she gave us has some things that changed in 2005. My understanding is in 2005, they gave up the golf in the meadow, which had to do with the annexation agreement. That's legal stuff. We won't go into that. Peggy also mentioned this was the crown jewel of Fraser. And as much as we love the meadow, it was offered to the town in 1980 for $1 million. The town said no, they didn't think it was worth it. Regis College owned it at the time. They were going to put 5,800 units, mostly dormitories, mostly along the highway. Their plan was far worse than what we have now. Then a bunch of lawyers bought it sometime in the 90s. They offered the meadow to the town or the people of the town because they needed money. And in 1995, the town refused to purchase the lot again, the meadow, so to speak. As far as the yellow buildings go, that has been a issue with the town taking too long to renew building permits, COVID happening, and then tax incentives being taken away 3 days after the building permit was put up. So developers have issues when you take away their purpose for building something. The other thing is, and I hate this because it is one of the worst things in real estate, views and view corridors are not vested rights. Every time I sell a lot, I try to explain to people as best I can where something else could be built. And I know it's crazy. Look at the buildings in Arrow, in Winter Park, the newest construction down there. The units on the back side, they all thought they had views for the rest of their lives. Now you've got 45 or 55 foot tall building blocking all their views. So the buildings in the back, the actual residents, look into residential units now. They've lost most of their views there. So that's why views aren't vested rights. Trees could grow up in your way, all that kind of stuff happens. They can build stuff. If you looked at the plans originally that Clark had in 2005, it showed that the height limits in 1WA were 75 feet, and 2WA, they were 55 feet. That's been on the plat. It's been every document I've seen since 2005. So being upset about that, yes, you can be upset about it, but views are not vested rights. The number one reason wildlife doesn't go through the meadow is people have dogs. A fence will not keep elk, deer, or moose out of the meadow. What keeps animals away from people is dogs. It's the number one reason. You can look it up in the wilderness guides. Dogs are what keep people, because dogs are like wolves and they're like coyotes. So that's how other animals look at them. So if you want to have wildlife, you got to keep dogs out of your open space. You got to keep their scent away or the animals won't come through. If you don't believe me, look it up. My position is I don't want to, I'm going with Garrett's recommendation. I don't think we kick it up to the board, but I think we continue it, especially with the new information we got so late in the afternoon today. Because the open space is still 661.6%, which is 183 acres of open space. And they're meeting their requirements for open space overall in 23W, sorry. So that if we can figure out how to move that stuff on the other side of American Willow Drive, all the buildings and stuff, I'm all for that. If there's a way to figure that out, I'm for it, because that's what I'd like to see. I'd like the meadow to stay as open as it can. And if I would have been able to get on the board in 2005 or 2003, I probably would have negotiated this completely different, but I wasn't on the board at that time.
Thank you, Parnell. Margaret?
I favor continuing this, until after the litigation. I just, that, that's what I think we ought to do.
Okay. What my understanding is we can only continue it like 30 days at a time. He's allowed to come back within 30 days.
That hasn't been brought up. You can deny.
I'm sorry, the public hearing's been closed.
Every 30 days.
Well, all right. So where I come down on this is we had a whole lot of new information presented tonight. It's an improvement over what was originally put in our packets to review. Unless Layla is got this incorrect in her responses to all of our attorney and our town planner, I'm taking a sentence out of one of her responses. She says, Grant Park has made an offer of compromise and settlement to Fraser to grant a conservation easement over the balance of Cozen's Meadow following approval of this pending FPDP. And to date, the town has not taken them up on that. Now, I don't know the validity of that statement, but it was in a response to the town. I feel like the way to move forward is to continue this matter, encourage our negotiators from the town to explore how we can overcome what differences we have. There's an offer, it appears there's an offer on the table to dedicate whatever's left over after negotiations as conservation easement. The litigation only will determine whether it's open space or a conservation easement. Correct? I mean, the judge could come back and say, it's all going to be open space.
Yeah, in its essence, that's a true statement, Bob. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of other issues injected into the settlement negotiations.
I understand that. And if you go back to the 2003, it does state that a conservation easement is going to be granted to the town of Fraser for Elk Creek and Cozen's Meadow. But because we don't know how to define Cozen's Meadow, we're going to have to let a judge do that.
Mhm.
So
or a jury, actually.
Or a jury, I should say, yes. So I feel like an appropriate way to move forward with this is to continue the matter and encourage the Board of Trustees to see if they can work out a settlement and get a conservation easement out of it.
That's certainly this board's prerogative.
Well, okay. So we've all had our say.
We are discussing an annexation agreement that was developed, 20 years ago, and it being left up to interpretation has been slowly being defined, and it's a very complicated thing to do. And that's why we are in the unfortunate place that we are of having this agreement hanging over all of our heads. It's not good for any of us. So, for us to gather more information, become more educated, and figure out the historical context of what that 20-year span has brought us to today, I think is important and it deserves some time.
Okay, commissioners, can I have a motion from someone as to how we want to move forward with this application?
I'll make the motion.
I make a motion that we continue the public hearing until the April meeting of the Planning Commission.
Do I
Or
have a second?
continue the, yeah.
I'm sorry, Margaret. Finish your sentence.
No, I was just trying to clarify, is that the right motion that we're continuing the public hearing or continuing the matter?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes, that's an appropriate motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Yes.
One opposed? So, the count you got, Antoinette?
Yes.
Okay.
May I just clarify? First, we closed the public hearing, so now if you want to continue the public hearing, I think you need to
Right.
state that motion maybe
No.
differently, because you guys did close the public hearing.
Well,
I
then
want
we're
to continue.
continuing the application.
Right.
Is that correct?
I don't know.
Mr.
What's
Attorney?
the wording in that you have in your?
Yeah, so the specific text in our code says, the planning commission may continue the matter, i.e., meeting or hearing. So the planning commission may continue the matter to allow a more comprehensive review of the project for a period not to exceed 30 days, unless a longer period is requested by the applicant to make revisions or provide additional information before the planning commission takes final action.
So actually, you have that proposed as a resolution?
No, it does not require a resolution. So I think if Antoinette feels it's appropriate, we could vote to reopen the public hearing and then vote to continue the public hearing, if that makes sense to the
Or
planning commission.
continue the matter.
Continue the matter.
Right.
You could amend the motion to say we continue the matter
All right.
rather than the public.
Margaret,
Thank
would you allow your motion to be amended as such?
Yes, that was that was part of the problem I was having. I didn't know exactly what we were continuing. Are we going to reopen the public hearing on the next meeting or not?
Possibly.
I mean, I think to cover our bases, we can still provide proper notice 2 weeks in advance of the April meeting. Treat it like it's a new public hearing, regardless of the specific motion this evening.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so
On,
Garrett,
on months where there's 31 days, is there an issue?
it's a matter of weeks.
It is 30 calendar days, and 30 days from today would be Friday, April 26th. So the planning commission on the 24th will fall less than 30 days from now.
But it won't always happen.
Potentially.
All right, so Garrett, would you read our motion that's been made and voted up on?
I would say it's a motion to continue the matter to the April planning commission meeting.
All right.
Is it possible to have that agenda item state discussion on continuance until injunction decision has been made?
I
I
I
would recommend
think we're
that.
getting in
No,
trouble.
I
with
wouldn't
the
okay.
Judge on that.
Okay,
I think it's fine how it is.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, so we've continued this matter until the April 24th meeting. All right, moving along to any outstanding issues here on our agenda. As an example, open forum to the public comment on items not on the agenda. Do we have any? Other business for commissioners to present any other items for future agenda items? Or any other items you may have?
Well, I think we should start thinking about it if we want to do master planning for the town, like we talked about for the Riverwalk district.
I thought
Good.
don't we have funding for that now?
The comprehensive plan will cover more. It's the entire municipal boundaries of Fraser.
But that could take a year for them to get stuff done. And by then, that Riverwalk will be developed. I would say that we have some meetings on that. Start
I
talking.
agree with that totally.
Okay,
And that would include discussion about commercial on the river front if we
Right.
need to amend the code or what we need to do there.
Right.
All right,
to encourage that.
okay.
Yeah.
Can you add that to our agenda for the 24th?
Yes, I think we will have time to discuss.
All right, thank you. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
I
Adjourn.
Thank you all for coming.
Yes, thank you, public.